Welcome. Drink with James, episode 135. I was in Lake Placid last week, as some of you may know, the coldest place on earth. It was negative 46 at the top of the mountain we were skiing at one day. I did not go skiing that day. And then come back to New York, and it's 67 degrees yesterday. And our brain-dead Cheeto Puff president was trolling all of us, liberals over Twitter, talking about, asking where all the global warming was. I think that I'll do my small part to just make sure everybody knows that we're talking about climate change, not global warming. I think that, although last year was the 4th hottest year on record. One second, I'm gonna put this on the floor. Anyway, I digress. I'm back in the city. It's hot. I have one of those weeks. You guys do this sometimes? I've got 4 drinks in a row, like 4 drinks meetings in a row this week. And I went in way too hard night 1, which was a terrible, terrible mistake. And then night 2, which was last night, was a pretty big struggle. I was gonna do the I've got a dinner reservation thing early and duck out, but that's just not the kind of person I am. Once I commit to drinking, I'm gonna do it. So tonight we have night 3. I'm feeling a little better. I'm not hungover today. I got up and rode. Tomorrow, night 4, and then we're done, and I can hibernate all weekend. But I seem to always do that when I'm out of town for a week. I come back and I pack the next week way too much. Anyway, I bring this up because I have nothing interesting to say other than that, so I'm just going to go into the questions. Question number 1. Do you think there's a peak for some influencers, 10K, 50K, that they can't overcome no matter what? Short answer is no. The longer answer is a little more complex than that. I do think if you're in a really small niche, then you can hit a ceiling where the only way to grow is to either try and exit that niche or wait for the ceiling that you've hit to get higher. And that can be a little more frustrating. But if you are, into something, let's just take, you guys know I'm a cyclist, let's just take that. Like outside of pro cyclists, which I don't put in the influencer space, the biggest cycling influencer I know maybe has 200,000 followers. So if all you talked about was bikes, I think it would get hard to get above that number because there's just not that many people interested in looking at photos of bikes all of the time. I do think eventually you could get beyond that 2, 3, 4, 500K level, but you have to wait for the ceiling to rise, and you have to think about where are you in relation to where is the person who has the most following in the space that you're playing in. Now, if you're not in a niche and you feel like you've hit a ceiling, I think that's more of a personal problem. And yeah, I think that if we're being realistic, I think that there are individuals out there that would have a really hard time building a bigger following than they have. I would, put myself in that category. If I said I'm quitting this job today and I want to have 500,000 followers in the next 2 years, I think I would really struggle to make that happen because of my level of talent, because of the kinds of things that I'm interested in, because of the person I am, because I'm fucking old and nobody cares. These things would make it difficult for me to get a following unless something else happened, i.e., I got famous for some other reason, God willing. So yeah, I think it can be tough. And I think that we've had this conversation before, and it's one that you have to have with yourself of just there are some people that it's not going to happen for. If you are I want this to be my job and I want to be a beauty or fashion or travel influencer, there are some people it's not going to happen for. That is just the world. You can say, I want to be a photographer. It doesn't mean that you get to be a photographer. You can say, I want to be a, huge beauty YouTuber. It doesn't mean that that is actually going to happen. There is a huge amount of luck in it. There's a huge amount that has to do with timing. There's a huge amount to do with, the situation in which you were born. And unfortunately, there are, I think for a lot of people, there are ceilings that will be very hard to kind of cross. I think you need to ask yourself, is this a ceiling that is there because of something situational, because of the types of content I'm talking about, or societal pressures or biases, or is that ceiling there because I am not as talented as the people that I am trying to outpace? That is a difficult but important conversation to have with yourself, because I think you can still enjoy Instagram and not have a huge following. You can still get a benefit from it and not have a huge following, but nobody is owed a following because they post. And I think that there is this feeling sometimes that I'm doing everything right. I'm listening to this show, and I'm listening to every podcast I can get my hands on, and I'm spending 2 hours a day interacting with people, and I'm doing giveaways, and I've got a professional photographer, and I'm doing everything right. Why isn't it working? And sometimes it's just, you're not it's the wrong time, or you're not the right person, and like that's a shitty thing, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be an opportunity, around the bend. I think we are entering the twilight of Instagram, specifically Instagram's hold over social media, and I think that their dominance at some point will be tested, and that new platform, whatever it might be, there will be a lot of opportunity there. The world also might change where it gets harder for everyone to build a following that large. Something that I've been thinking about recently, of just like, is it going to get more and more fractured, and our following is going to get more and more niche and smaller, especially as bigger influencers flood their feeds with sponsored posts and lose their authenticity. Are we going to see a next Something Navy, or Kim Kardashian? Are we going to see a next version of that? Or does it become much harder or impossible to grow to a certain level because there is so much supply out there of content? There's only so much you can put out into the world. And again, if you look at other media industries, cable, magazines, newspapers, there's this period where there's huge growth in the amount of content that there is, and then that industry eventually collapses on itself and kind of eats itself, and the strong survive. The New York Times I just saw today, has the most subscribers they've had in 13 years. The strong survive. The Wall Street Journal does well. The New York Times is doing well. The Washington Post is doing well. I think New Yorker's doing pretty well. I think Vogue is honestly still doing fairly well. But you lose, the people that weren't at the top. That's why it's, vitally important to, when you think about your life, think about the things that you are good at, and make sure that you're dedicating your life based around things that you are better than most people in the world at. Procter & Gamble will not stay in a market if they are not number 1 or 2. And usually obviously prefer to be number 1, but if they're in deodorant and their product is number 3 and they can't get to number 2, they sell it and they exit, because for them it's not worth being number 3, 4, 5, 6. They have been a pretty rare company that's been able to continue to be dominant for decades. I think there's some pretty powerful lessons there that if you don't think, I think I talked about this in the foreground with Tim, is that if you don't think you can be the best in the world at something, I think that it will be pretty difficult for you to find the kind of transformative success that I think a lot of you are looking after. So I just would encourage everyone to be honest, and if you feel like you're at a ceiling, try and ask yourself, is this a ceiling I think I can break? Or have I gotten everything I can out of this, and I'm going to try something else. Again, I felt like when I was shooting that I hit a wall, and I was like, this is as far as I can take it. I can shoot for 15 more years and I will get marginally better, but like I'll never be able to take it farther than this. So like I'm going to like say thank you. I'm going to like Marie Kondo this, you know, this entire industry and be like, I have gotten joy from you and now I discard you. And I still do it for fun and I still enjoy it. I just didn't have to make it my job. And I was able to do something that, you know, ideally, hopefully one day, makes me quite a bit more successful than I would have been as a photographer. So embrace the unknown, understand, and ask yourself what those ceilings are there for. So that was a long one, but. Okay. Question number 2, how can you find, this is a good one to do after, how can you find a balance between the content that your audience responds to and the kind that you want to create? Again, I think we've answered something similar in the past, but this is your feed. You know, I think you have to first ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because I want to grow and I want to get a lot of followers? Or am I doing it because I enjoy it? I think that if you follow only what your audience responds to, I think you quickly will grow to hate your Instagram account. I remember talking with a huge influencer years ago, and she was saying how she hated the persona that she had created on Instagram, and her account was so big, it was in the millions of followers, that she couldn't exit from that persona. And so she felt like there was 2 versions of her, you know, the version of her on her feed and the reality of her life. And she grew to resent and hate what she did every day because she was, you know, kind of put into a corner of posting about the things that people wanted to see, which was her really happy and smiley and traveling and doing all these amazing and chic things. But she was like, you know, battling some, you know, mental health issues, battling some physical health issues. She was kind of going through all of this stuff that she didn't feel allowed to talk about because what people wanted was this other thing. So I think it's a slippery slope. I think you're foolish to ignore what your audience is responding to, and you're foolish to be beholden to it as well. So I think you have to find the balance that works for you and ask yourself, why are they responding to certain things, but also make sure that you're, you know, continuing to enjoy it. I think, you know, if I was going to post stuff that did well on my Instagram, it would just be a picture of like me and my girlfriend every day. That seems to do the best. And not that I wouldn't want to post a photo of me and my girlfriend every day, but that's not realistically why I started an Instagram account. And so I don't do that. You know, I think I could probably have a bigger following if I talked more about influencers and about, you know, strategies and stuff on my personal account. But like, you know, I do that 12 hours a day. I don't want to do it on my personal Instagram account. So like, you have to figure out what's in it for you, why you're doing it, and make sure you balance understanding why things are doing well with doing something that actually makes you happy.
Did you consider going into like influencer strategy on your personal Instagram, or was it always like so black and white?
I mean, no, I've never really considered going into like influencer strategy on my personal Instagram. I think one, it just kind of muddies what we're doing with Fohr. You know, it's a kind of complex thing. I mean, I feel like it's pretty hard to separate like where I, as a sentient being, end and Fohr starts. I feel like they're pretty connected, but I would rather, you know, the kind of following be funneled to Fohr. If you're interested in specifically influencer stuff, we have a whole team here that is, you know, kind of working on cutting these videos up, pulling in insights, you know, posting stuff that specifically influencers would be interested in. I mean, I guess I've thought about it, but ultimately, it's just not something I want to do. Again, I love I love talking about this stuff, obviously. I love that it's gotten a response and is making people happy, but I don't want to be beholden to, if I have this Instagram account for 15 more years, I don't know that I want to be spending every day, having to throw up influencer tips into my Instagram, because that's what I build my following on. That's for the company, that's for work, that's not, for me personally. So. Question, thank you, number 3. How do you see artificial intelligence technologies impacting the influencer market? So I know there's a few AI influencers out there, which, okay, I don't follow the computer influencers. I don't know that much about them. That won't stop me from talking about it, but I will just caveat that by saying I don't really know much about them. First of all, AI is a grossly overused term for just technology, because I don't actually think that the AI influencers are AI. They're just computer generated influencers with people behind them. They're not just I don't think they're sentient AI making their own decisions about what they're posting. So I don't know that it's totally AI. Now, what will happen in the influencer space? I mean, there is talk of are these computer generated influencers going to start to take over? There's a couple out there that have a huge following. I would say that's because of the novelty of it, not because they're especially interesting. Do I think that there can be tens of thousands of, influencers that aren't real people? Potentially. I do think that from the little I know about AI, the most difficult thing is to, what do I want to say? I think the most difficult thing is to program in spontaneity and creativity, because the nature of it is that it is an equation that is constantly running, taking in inputs and spitting out outputs. I think we're pretty far away from being able to replicate spontaneity and creativity. So I don't think there's going to be a huge problem in the influencer space. Now, how can it help you? I think that we can probably start to see some programs that will do a better job of looking at your feed, understanding what's working, what's not, maybe pulling out insights that you don't understand, maybe looking at globally what's happening in social and Instagram, and able to kind of find seams for different influencers and people on strategies that are working, or things that aren't being talked about that might leave some white space for you to kind of grab. So I could see programs like that actually being quite beneficial to influencers, and just being able to crunch an incredible amount of data. We all live in our sphere of influence, right? You have your feed, and it's pretty hard to get outside of your feed, and especially as the world becomes increasingly dependent on algorithms. This is a frustration I have with music, is that, if you listen to a lot of Spotify and then you are looking to Spotify and discover playlists to find new music, by nature of that, your music taste will start to narrow, because as we talked about with AI, spontaneity is difficult. I think I've talked about this before, potentially, have I?
Yeah.
So it's the AI doesn't know to jump outside of your tastes and say, maybe this week you want to listen to the blues if you've never listened to the blues. And so it will just ignore that completely. Unless there's other people who listen to similar things of you listening to the blues, it might make that assumption. Even if, we were building algorithms to help us understand what content we specifically should be posting, I would be wary of depending too much on it. Because again, I think that when you see new trends in social, it's generally people bucking the current trends in a fairly dramatic way. And I don't think a computer can predict what those what your direction should be if you're moving away from the current trend yet. AI might get that advanced eventually, but we're certainly not there yet. So I wouldn't worry about it. If we get to that point, we're probably all about to die anyway. If you believe what Elon says, we're probably all going to end up being enslaved by machines. I will probably be dead by then, but any of our younger influencers out there watching this now, you might have to deal with it. So good luck battling our robot overlords. Listen, guys, I've got drink number 3 this evening, going to the Mark Hotel uptown. If you find yourself in New York and you have to drink uptown, it's not as terrible as you would think. I generally would rather drink uptown than eat uptown, but favorite bars uptown has a kicker here at the end. Number 1 is the Carlisle Hotel, obviously. Number 2, this would be number 1, would be the Polo Bar, but it's not really a bar because you can't go to get a drink there unless you have a reservation there. It is annoyingly difficult to get a reservation there, but Polo Bar, St. Regis, very chic. Tonight we're going to the Mark Hotel, which is also very chic and lovely. So Upper East Side has fantastic hotel bars and everything else. Well, it's got that, it's got the Met, Guggenheim, and MoMA. And other than that, it is a complete wasteland and to be avoided at all costs. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.